Peace and love, everyone. Thanks for being here live and by recording. I don't have the outside mic on today because I think I'm interfering with people in their meditations and hearing things. So let's see how that goes. But thanks for being here. Today, we're going to continue in our Women in Mystical Women series. This is with Hildegard of Bingen, one of my favorite. Hildegard of Bingen, 1098, a little history here, 1179, was a German Benedictine abbess, visionary, composer, writer, herbalist, leader, and Christian mystic. Canonized as a saint and later named a doctor of the church by Pope Benedict the 16th, Hildegard stands out as one of the most extraordinary figures of all of the medieval period of mystics. From childhood, she experienced vivid visions that she described as the living light. We hear this a lot, the living light, from NDEers and others, which she later recorded with theological mystical depth, artistry, symbolism, and mystical clarity in music and paintings and writings. She composed music and poetry that blended the divine praise with the cosmic harmony, while also contributing writings on medicine and the natural world based on empirical observation, because she was brilliant, and spiritual insight. Her holistic vision wove together this body, soul, creation, divinity into a single radiant tapestry, offering a feminine, ecological, and profoundly mystical perspective that continues to resonate right down to today. So here's a quote, but before, let's see. Hey, Maggie. Hey, Kristen. Hey, Ann. So here's your quote for today. The marvels of God are not brought forth from one's self. Rather, it's more like a chord, a sound that's played. The tone doesn't come out of the chord itself, but rather from the touch of the musician with a capital M, meaning the divine, rather from the touch of the musician. I am, referring to herself, I am, of course, the lyre, Lyre, the musical instrument, and the harp of God's kindness. So let's take a look at that. So when she wrote, the marvels of God are not brought forth from oneself, rather it's more like a chord, a sound that's being played, and I am, of course, the musical instrument of God's kindness, she presents a metaphor that speaks directly to the essence of our mystical lives. She's conveying that the soul doesn't generate the divine power in and of itself. It receives it and transmits it, much like when Meister Eckhart talks about the eye wherein I see God is the same eye and God sees me. There's this intermediary space where, funnily, strangely, there is no in between. It's paradoxical. The marvels of the good, with a capital G, meaning God, the good that Mary Magdalene talks about in her gospel, the marvels of the good don't emerge through self-will or effort. And we hear this also from Hindu gurus. It's not our effort that brings forth the good. They aren't our achievements. They occur through us, just as music emerges through a stringed instrument when touched by the hand of the divine musician. And it isn't passivity on our part. The harp, the violin, the guitar, the banjo must be strung and shaped and tuned. That's our responsibility. It must be responsive, kept in tune. There's a sense of participation here, a readiness that the mystics across traditions and throughout history, I've said it 1,000 times, have called surrender or surrendered availability. In Sufi imagery, and I think it's Rumi, we hear about where the reed flute through which the breath of Allah plays. In Christian scriptures and the epistles, Paul writes, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And Hildegard, she stands in the same lineage. Her individuality isn't erased, obviously, because she was such a powerhouse intellect. but it's refined into a transparency. She becomes a vessel, a voice, an instrument resonating with something far beyond herself. And that can be true for us too. We hear this in that famous prayer attributed to St. Francis, make me a channel of your peace. A channel. We channel this, that which we are and the ground of our being. And Hildegard emphasizes that the divine impulse is initiated by the divine, not by the mystic. And some of us, and I was talking to somebody yesterday, came a long way to visit me and gave me this wonderful Ganesh and a bunch of other gifts, and I thank you very much. But we were talking about this very subject. There are people who are born this way, and people who are brought to it later in life. This is a divine impulse initiated by the divine, not really by mystics. Especially if you're born a mystic and suddenly you start having these mystical experiences. You're not just some little kid who's dreamt this up. It's just happening to you. And we heard about this a long time ago when we were talking about the varieties of religious experience with William James, and how we can't make it happen. It just happens to us. Some of us are born this way, shaped by the divine hand before we even arrive on earth. The tone doesn't come out of the chord itself, but rather through the touch of the musician. The chord doesn't play itself. This single sentence distills her entire mystical cosmology, or maybe all of mystical cosmology. It denies the ego's claim to spiritual accomplishment and achievement and reframes the soul's role as radically receptive. The omniscient acts first. The mystic responds. It's grace, not effort, that animates the soul's song. And in my own near-death experience, I encountered this truth directly, and I brought back just a thimbleful of it. I didn't make the light appear. I didn't summon it. It took me. I was drawn into it, loved beyond comprehension, filled with knowledge and presence that didn't come from my own being, but passed through me in a transparency as if I was maybe even just translucent because I had this substance to myself. And I know translucent and transparent are contradictory, but that's the way it is. When I returned to this life, I understood something essential. I'm not the source of creation. We're not the source of creation. We are formed from, by, and with the creative source. I'm not the infinite light, yet the light makes us, lives in us, and is us. As Mary Magdalene says in her gospel, there's no in between. It's paradoxical, I know. In this life, we can be reformed. We're in the practice here. That's what we're doing here. Reforming ourselves to carry it, to reflect it, to give it sound through surrender. Hildegard was a visionary, a healer, a composer, and a preacher. She lived this out with astonishing clarity. Her visions, as she repeatedly insisted, weren't her own invention, any more than our visions are ours. We didn't make them up. We didn't cause them to happen. They came to us, transforming us. She wasn't the author of her revelations. She was the instrument, the stringed instrument, the flute. The marvels that came through her weren't from her. She knew this. We know this. When these experiences happen to us, it's very clear. This distinction is the difference between performance, acting, and mystical presence. The moment the self tries to take credit, the song goes flat. Have you ever felt that? When you try to step in the way to show yourself and the whole thing just goes flat? And notice this, I'm the lyre and the harp, the instrument of God's kindness, mercy, compassion, love. That's the music the divine chooses to play through those who surrender themselves to love. And it's universally true. How could she know what was happening in India? Same thing. The marvels of the benevolent composer are for healing. They're the tones of remembrance and restoration, awakening others to their own divine belonging, not through being an evangelist through force or coercion, but simply by being in the presence itself and letting God take care of the rest. It's not my job to convince anybody of any of this. I'm not trying to do that here. That's the divine's job. That's the other person's job. All we're called to do is make me a channel. That's it. The image also conveys this profound mystical theology of embodiment, incarnational. The instrument is physical, tangible, made of wood, sinew for the strings, tension and shape and hollowness, if it's a guitar or banjo, or mandolin, violin, cello, flute. Just as the soul is shaped by suffering, joy, longing, and love, we become instruments through the very lives we live. Our brokenness becomes a part of this resonance. The holes in the flute, the hole in the center of the guitar. The more hollow we are, the more space there is for the sound with a capital S. In mystical theology, this is what Evelyn Underhill, the great scholar from last century, described as the transfigured self. No longer the source, but the medium. Lots of people talk about mediums. We are mediums of the divine. And maybe you're a guitar and I'm a violin and she's a flute and she's a drum set. Every sound is similar but different, and together they create this cacophony of beautiful music. Cacophony is not the right word, harmony. The marvels of the beloved, ineffable, become audible when the soul is sufficiently quiet and sufficiently open. And that's our practice. Simple. Hildegard calls this veritatis, the greening power of the divine vitality flowing into the world through those who are rooted in the divine. So, what's required of us? What do we do? What's our responsibility? Readiness, consent, devotion, adoration, silence, gratitude. We prepare ourselves to be played, to be touched, to become instruments of the kindness of Allah, of Brahman. This isn't something to be controlled by us or manipulated. It's just our job to trust. The marvels of the benevolent, omniscient, omnibenevolent aren't ours to possess. We don't own them. We can't grasp them. But they are ours to carry, like music vibrating through the bones of a finely tuned instrument in the hands of a master. When we allow ourselves to be played by the musician, the world hears something it's long forgotten and loves to remember. The sound of love. So thanks for being here this morning. Hi, 5008. Hi, Peggy. Hi, Holly. Thank you all for being here this morning, live and by recording. I'm going to set my timer here so we can finish by the bottom of the hour. Trying to always prevent my speech impediments from coming out. Let's see, 8:30. Make sure the volume's not too high, but it has to be on. It wasn't on at all. I didn't have a chance to write a little meditation this morning. It was kind of a busy morning. So let's just talk about how we're going to meditate. We have our practices. Some of you come to the Yoga Sutra practice that we have on Tuesdays. You're welcome to practice any of those techniques. If you're new here, a simple technique is the centering prayer practice, contemplative meditation. Pick a prayer, pick a chant, pick a word, Chant it over and over again when the mind wanders. Don't get mad at yourself because if mind wanders, mind still does. Even after all these years, decades of practice, just be thankful, give gratitude for the wandering mind because you have a mind to wander, and then bring it back to the breath. Inhaling into the belly, saying your chant silently inside yourself, breathing out through your nose, saying your chant. You might use Om. You guys want to do a little sound meditation? That just maybe a little Om this morning. I'm still learning to practice that again after this long hiatus in my life. So excuse me, let's begin with a little Om practice and then drop into your own meditation until the bottom of the hour. And one of the reasons why we meditate together is because it's a ritual practice. It gives you structure, creates community, but also because when we practice together, we share the presence of the divine. All right, so my feet are flat on the floor. I'll do maybe 3 Om chants into my belly, Om, vibrating in my belly, in my chest, in my throat, with feeling the vibration, and then I'll drop into my own prayer. You can too. Inhaling. Peace and love, everyone. Peace and love, everyone. Peace and love. Elizabeth Hugh, Rosenberg Hugh, good morning. How do I join the Patanjali classes? If you're on my email list, my large email list at peterpanagore.love, tomorrow morning you'll get an email at about 7 a.m. Eastern Time, and it will have the link and information. So sign up subscribe to my email at my website, and tomorrow morning you'll get it. Peace and love, everyone. Thanks for being here. Amen.